So it makes sense to me that I went into production in the sense of like, I always kind of put my stamp on whatever it is I'm doing. You're not coming to me as the producer just to document what you're doing. Like, I can tell you the names of 6 other engineers that I think you should go do that with. But like, if you want to collaborate and if you want me to apply my musical world to the beauty of your songwriting and what is important to you and the message you want to get across, we're going to get along so well.
There has got to be more than this.
Anthony da Costa, thank you so much, man, for coming. I would say coming over the river, but you didn't. You kind of came parallel the river.
Yeah, I'm not so far away.
It's great to see you. Thank you.
I
don't even know what's going to happen here. It's going to be exciting. We've got new tech involved in this to show off laptops.
Has anyone heard of laptops before?
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
Anthony's got one of the first ones. And I want to get into that, but I also want to satisfy some of my own personal curiosities about your origin story, because I've known you for 10 years, and I think that you had a career that predated that by another 10 years. You were like not even a young man. You were an old child, I think.
I was an old child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some would say you still are.
Yeah.
Some would, not anyone I know. But I just been curious, like, how did you get involved in this, first of all? Mm-hmm. Like, what were the early musical experiences that made you go like, oh, I have some knack for this? Well,
it all started with singing in Catholic church choir. That's how that was my first kind of exposure to performing, because I liked going to mass because I loved singing in front of people, and I joined the choir when I was 5 years old, and I would come up with all my own harmonies and stuff. And my parents are both musical. My mom did theater growing up, and my father more of a music fan. He took guitar lessons for a week or two when he was a young adult, and then dropped that. And they both went into public relations, but they both had pretty extensive musical knowledge. My dad more about my dad's a Portuguese American kid from Yonkers, New York, who has a very deep appreciation and understanding of country and bluegrass. My dad, he was a DJ for WFUV in the late 70s and early 80s.
Still a vital station today.
Yeah, totally. Still around. I mean, I ended up getting to play on it a bunch of times much later. He and my mom met at that school. You didn't ask me about how my parents met. That's okay. But the point being that they both, my mom was into a lot more Nancy Griffith and John Denver, the Wildlife Concert by John Denver was one of the favorite CDs in the house. But they started taking me to church, and I immediately started singing, and that's where I developed my sense of harmony, and also my just sort of any sort of performance skill. Because again, I really liked singing in front of people. Even if they were all very reserved Catholics, kind of looking down at their pew, it was fun. And and some of those songs kind of sick. But
what was it? It wasn't Gregorian chants.
No, it was here I don't know if this is copywritten. Probably, here I am, Lord, is it I, Lord, I have heard you calling in the night. Stuff like that. But I was joking with somebody recently about through him, with him, in the unity of the Holy Spirit. That was the priest song. All glory and honor is yours, Almighty Father. They all knew the same. Forever. We go, amen. Anyway, so I did that, but we were singing songs. And so, yeah, there was that. But then I started picking up guitar when I was 9 or 10. My mom found it really important to have me learn that. I tried piano, and it just formal Suzuki method piano, and it didn't appeal to me at all. I liked sports. I was never incredible at them, but I loved them so much, and so I kind of was more interested in that. By the time the guitar came around, that was easier for me to wrap my head around, and I started taking lessons with this guy at a music store in a strip mall in Thornwood, New York. And his name was Rich, and we would do these lessons where it was like clockwork. Every week he would show up 10 minutes after our lesson started, he would be coming from the CVS next door, where he would be, he would buy a bag of Planters peanuts, and he would walk in with his guitar all like late to our session. Then we'd go back to the lesson room behind, down the hall in the store, and he would show me some song by his band. He had this band called Homesick for Space, and they were kind of like a Radiohead-y sort of thing, and he would show me whatever they were working on, and I'd be like, cool, man, you know? And then in the last 10 minutes, he would teach me a Beatles song, and that's like how I learned guitar. And I think it's like, it was just that classic thing where like I found out about the Beatles, and then I found out my dad had already showed me like Elvis and all the early rock and roll stuff, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and my mom was showing me like, you know, Nancy Griffith and Joni Mitchell and stuff like that. And then like at around 13, I found my dad is into, it's not cool, but he's into like, he had a lot of greatest hits albums because he was like, it's all the best stuff, you know?
Yeah, why not?
And so he had Bob Dylan's greatest hits on vinyl. I put it on the thing. It's probably the first time I ever like put a record on a record player, and got hooked. And through Dylan, you find Woody Guthrie and all that stuff. So I had already had little like basement and garage bands with friends, but around 13, I just started like learning folk songs and writing stuff and, you know, about whatever middle school relationship I had going. And I got taken to my first open mic when I was 13. And that was like,
By your folks?
yeah, my dad. It was at a church, I think a Unitarian church in Pleasantville, New York. And I wore probably an ill-fitting brown leather jacket and the harmonica rack,
Classic.
my night brace.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I sang, my set list was 2 songs in the key of G. I will always remember. I did The Times They Are Changing, and I did Helpless by Neil Young. And I swear I got up there and they said, we've got Anthony da Costa. And they started, I started into the turn, jigga, 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 come gather around people. And I got applause. And I was 13, and I had definitely not written that song.
Yeah.
But I just immediately got hooked on this feeling of like singing songs like that for people with a guitar. And then I just like never stopped. I just like kept running into all these people in the Hudson Valley. There's like a pretty rich like scene there of like folk music. And I came across this group called Tribes Hill, and they were like this collective of folk musicians in the Hudson Valley. And a guy who's still out there playing in that area named Fred Gillen Jr., who like writes a lot of political folk music and a lot of really beautiful love ballads. I haven't seen him in many years, but Fred kind of like took me under his wing. He like found me at one of those open mics and was like, here, come to this one too, and come, I'm going to book you a show at this coffee shop I play at in Tarrytown. So I started getting gigs there, and like everybody from my school came, and they either thought it was super cool or super lame, you know, because it was folk music. But, and then he had a studio, and I just went and started, I recorded in my parents' basement, but he brought me to a studio, and he had like real microphones, and I made records there, just standing there with a guitar, and like, I just got hooked, and I never really wanted to do anything else.
Was this in like, what would you say, 04?
04 would have been the first open mic. 05 would have been the first gig at Coffee Labs in Tarrytown. And then, and I was making like my CDs. I was like, I would go record at Fred's, sometimes with some help from friends that I had met. And he had cool, weird old like Supro amplifiers and like, you know, but I would just stand there. He said one of our records, I just stood there and sang like 17 songs without drinking a glass of water. You know, I was like 14 or 15. Yeah. And then I would get them, at first we would get them pressed. My dad found this is what you had to do then. Like, I know I'm not old, but like, even then, like, we were still primarily printing on CDs. And like, my dad found this guy in Harlem who like would duplicate your CDs, just silver plain CD with like text on it, and like would sell you some jewel cases. This is before I even knew what like
was the text printed. Was it that fancy?
Yeah,
Okay, that's a
it was
step
something,
up.
and it was probably cheap. And so like that's how I printed all my first CDs, and then we eventually discovered like the avenues that people use now for those things. Those companies existed.
CD Baby and et cetera.
Yeah, like Oasis. Oasis is what I used at first, and I just started making these CDs and just playing coffee shops, and it sort of translated into like a couple folks were like, you should, there's this thing called Folk Alliance. And I like, which I always say sounds like the most easily defeated alliance on the face of the planet. And it probably is, but it was fun. And I went down there and I got like, they like gave me a scholarship to go to Memphis to the international one.
How old were you at this point?
At that point I was probably 16 and I just met everyone. I met like my friend Lewis Myers, who ran the whole thing, right, was the executive director. He's since passed, but Lewis was like, come down. He saw me at the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance, and he goes, like, come to the international conference, and we'll pay for your plane ticket. And my dad came with me, and he's like, show up a day early. And I show up a day early, and what that meant was we're going to all volunteer to stuff tote bags together. The tote bags at those things are full of like, people pay to have like a sampler CD in there, or like the restaurant menu from the barbecue place up the street. It was boring. It was assembly line work stuffing these tote bags that were given, 2,000 tote bags. But I met like Raina Rose, who's still like my best friend in the world, and like Greg Klima. I met just like all these people on that line. Corin Raymond, great songwriter from Canada. And these people just became my friends. And we just, you've been there. We just like played songs all night. And like people started, buying me alcohol before I should have been having it. And we like were up till 5 a.m. every night, and then would like sleep in as much as we could and then do it all over the next day in this hotel where we were like probably like preemptively inventing COVID, like that's a horrible thing to say. But like, it was like we would all just get sick and we'd be all up all night, and it was like, so incredible. And that led to me doing more like folk festivals. Like I met people from festivals. There's this festival in Kerrville, Texas called the Kerrville Folk Festival. They have a songwriting competition. You should go apply. So I did, and I was 16, and they were like, you have 2 songs you can submit, and they can't be longer than 8 minutes combined. And I was like, shoot. And back then I was learning how to write songs, but I couldn't write a song that was halfway good, I thought, without it being like 5 minutes long. Like most of my great songs that I thought I had at the time, and a couple of them still hold that, but they were like 5 minutes each.
What's an early one that from those years, but maybe I've heard?
There's a song called, that you've heard, I don't know, but there's a song called, the song I submitted to that was called Dolly and Porter, which was written about Dolly Parton and Porter Wagner long before I lived in Nashville, but just based on stories my dad had told me and records that I'd heard of them and their romance and their musical partnership. So I knew that one. I had that one. And I was like, I'm going to submit Dolly and Porter. But then I was like, shoot, I only have 3 minutes left, And so I picked just a random song on my CD that was 3 minutes long. I didn't know if it was good or whatever, it just was what I had. And then I get down there, and our mutual friend, Danny Schmidt, is in the same competition the same year. And all of his songs at the time were like 10 minutes long. They were these sprawling, beautiful, crazy, poetic songs. And he was up there for like, 15 minutes or something. And I thought, anyway.
In your case, what's interesting, it strikes me, is that all these people are older than you. So you were like older. Always the kid in this crew.
Yes.
And I wonder... that continued until when did that start to kind of lose its not hold on you, but like as a defining characteristic of your nature, your relationship to the scene? Like, because now you're, it's
just
contemporaries. You're just another guy, dude.
Yeah.
Did you see that happening, or did you feel it, or did you wake up one day and you're like, oh yeah, I'm just another guy?
Well, I tried to remember all the time, and especially living in a place like the place we live in Nashville, that comparison is the thief of joy. Ooh, but
I've heard that before.
I had some contemporaries within, give or take, like 2 or 3 years of me. There were some other artists that I knew at the time who were like also fairly young, also like kind of making the rounds at these festivals and these conferences and doing the thing. People like my friend Seth Gleer, who I now have produced and is like still my dear friend after all these years, or someone like John Fulbright. Like I met him at the Woody Guthrie Folk Festival when we were like, I was 16 and maybe he was 18. I don't know how far apart we are, but a lot of these folks were kind of like, we were all doing the thing, but the decision that I made to, because it's funny, like I'm not really shy about saying this now because it's like kind of funny, but like my business as Anthony da Costa, the artist, not producer, not guitar player, like has never made technically more money than it did when I was like between the ages of 16 and 18.
Yeah.
Like between the ages of 16 and 18, like I was getting booked at like decently large folk festivals, but festivals. I was getting booked at the Tønder Festival in Denmark every year, you know. I was getting support slots opening for like Loretta Lynn and like all these people and like playing small theaters at times. It was like kind of funny to look back at now. And so like and I think a turning point for me, and you could say like the novelty of me being like a kid at the time is like definitely a big part of that, which I am fine with. But I think I was doing, if not yet fully developed work, I was like very proud of what I was doing and very dedicated to it above anything else. So I think that also came through. The decision that I made to go to college has always kind of felt like a turning point in that, because some of I don't want to speak for anybody but myself, but like I know Seth did, I think, a year at Berklee and then left, you know, and kind of just started out on the path. I don't know if Fulbright ever went to school, but he just hit the road. And there was a part of me in the kind of the couple of years after that always wondered like, what would have happened if I just like hit the road,
in it, yeah.
Just stayed in it, because I really like at that, it was expected in my family that I was going to go to college, which is a privilege and a lucky thing. And they actually wanted me to go to music school. Like my dad wanted me to go to music school, and I went and I auditioned at Berklee. And you know, back then you could already you could major in being a singer-songwriter at Berklee, which in my head in one place I was like, I've already been doing that for years. Like I don't really need them to teach me how to do it. But I thought I'll go, and I auditioned with like one of my songs, and then whoever it was, I'm sure they were wonderful, picks up like a Strat and was like, cool. So like, what would you say if I did this? And he played like some college chords, you know, and he wanted me to vocally improvise. Essentially scat, which I scat for no man. I don't zippity doo dah for anyone. I can improvise, but I went to some parties at Berklee that weekend. I was kind of getting a feel for it. I went to the class where they said, this is the way you record drums. And, you know, did you know that Brandy's vocals are actually layers of like 98 of her? You know, I was learning stuff like that. And then I just went to a party and I just had this moment, and no disrespect, that school has done amazing things. And we know some people who stuck it out, but I was like, just wishing someone would talk about anything else, like biology, like anything, things I don't even know about, maybe especially things I didn't know about. And I had this deep-seated feeling that if I went there, I would have left. So around the same time, I had a songwriting mentor named Jack Hardy, who has also since passed. But Jack said to me, he called me Grasshopper, and he said to me on the subject of college, he said, Grasshopper, you've spent years putting things out there. You know, he's referring to these years of being a young singer-songwriter and making all these records and traveling. And he goes, it's time to put some stuff back in. So I applied to Columbia University, and much to the chagrin of some very competitive girls in my senior year of high school, that I got in and they did not. They were very mad at me, and they said, you only got in because you were in the New York Times. That's what they said to me. I'll never forget that
Whatever
either.
it takes.
Yeah, I was like, whatever, because their GPAs were higher than mine. But I got into Columbia, and I managed to finish. You know, I went there for 4 years and graduated. I have a degree in history from there. I've done nothing with it, and I've not thought about it since, other than the life experience of going to that school while also trying to further or continue a career in music.
Yeah.
But that was a divide of like, I kind of had this chance. Like I was talking to managers down here, and I was talking to a couple. Rounder Records was like
prior to this.
Oh yeah. Rounder Records like was coming to my gigs when I was 17, like labels that, you know, I may or may not get in a door with now. Like I had these conversations when I was a kid, 16, 17, taken in front of the head of BMI, and here's Taylor Swift's publisher, this, you know, whatever, like this was all happening. But my parents really wanted me to go to school. And
are you an only child?
No, I'm a middle child, if that makes any sense. I have an older sister and a younger brother.
They went to college too?
Everybody did, yeah.
Gotcha.
My sister my sister, yeah, everybody did. But yeah, so that decision was like, it's informed a lot in my life, I think, and not necessarily like it ruined everything. Like I think that was a valuable time, and like writing a thesis, and like the people I met there and the experiences I had finally of just living in the city after growing up in Westchester, like all of that's informed things. But I've had a couple moments of like, I wonder.
Yeah.
We try not to live our lives from regret, but I've had a couple moments, especially back then, of like, what if I had just done it, like gotten an agent and just like tried like that, you know? But
my gut feeling is it probably served you really well to just not.
Yeah,
be in
I think
the
so
scene.
too. As a life thing, I think so too. And it also like
it deepened your well. There's no doubt. You
oh
know?
yeah,
The exposure to ideas, the exposure to different people outside of the music business.
Yeah, yeah,
so.
I think so too.
And also, you know, you were in a humanities major, so
yeah,
history, reading,
something's in there.
Something's in there.
Yeah, I read a
like
little
it
bit.
pops out now and then. Yeah, it's funny because I feel like those are the Anthony da Costa, the lost years. You know, I never hear about that time. I knew that you went to Columbia, but you know,
I can tell you about it.
Come up.
I could
Only if it's interesting.
Only if it's interesting. Well, my freshman year was basically, my first couple of years were basically like me. I would like go to class and then I would like run down to Brooklyn and like hang out at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg with AJ Roach, and we would drink, and then I would go sleep on his couch, and I would wake up really early in the morning to him coughing because he was smoking all night the night before, and then I'd get one more hour of sleep in on the couch, and then we would go down to the coffee shop and get matching iced mochas. And then I would like kind of do it all over again, and sometimes go to class, and once in a while not. And I just like, I still played. I was like playing in the city all the time. I was like still developing my sound, and I toured as much as I could. I left on the weekends. I did my first long serious tour that summer. But yeah, it was a double life. And at a school like Berkeley, if you're trying to tour and do that, they kind of have leniency with you. They're like, oh, well, you're here to further your musical knowledge in your career. We understand that. They even give you like something called an artist's diploma, which isn't the full shebang, but it says like, you were here. At Columbia, they were like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, like
I had a real school.
I had a rough year there. You know, whatever. I had a rough year there, and my advisor was kind of like, hey man, like you kind of got to be here, you know? So, but I made it. I have a thing. It's on my mom's wall. We did it.
You did it. Box checked. So you've toured for a very long time as an artist. You made, how many records are we up to?
I don't know.
You're right.
15 or more.
A lot of records. And it's surprising to me that it was only recently that you sort of took the plunge into the producer's chair.
Yeah.
And that was maybe a pandemic thing, or what prompted that? And did you always want to do it? Produce? Did you feel like you were headed there eventually, or?
I don't know. I mean, I did it. I recorded in my parents' basement when I was a kid. I had two 58s and like the Guitar Center drum set and like a hilarious PC, and like did that for a bit. But this, I almost went to school for audio engineering at NYU. I got into this program. It's like hard to get into. They let like 20 people in every year. Go me, I guess. But then I sat in on one class and they were talking about circuits, and I was like, I gotta get out of here. Yeah. And so what I did, I just kept every city I lived in, New York, then Austin, Texas, and now Nashville. I just kept meeting wonderful engineer producers who were so good at what they did, and I could just roll in and play my songs, and we'd collaborate, and I'd weigh in, and sometimes we'd co-produce. But that was my way for a long time. And then it was 2016 that my dear friend from Austin, Sela, incredible artist who's been just like a lifer musician in Austin for a long time. Sela, I was living in her house because I went through one of my breakups and needed a place to live. And she was like, hey, in exchange for rent, how about you just produce a record for me? And I hadn't ever produced another artist, and I hadn't produced anything in years. But I was like, okay. And I made this record with her called Track You Down that I'm really proud of. I had a big hand in kind of like arrangement and sound, and it was like my band, including her husband. But and then she kind of finished it out because she's a producer and has a really clear vision of what she's after. But that was me dipping my toes into it. But then it took the pandemic where I what I've realized, and you're someone who creates a lot of your stuff. You do this is like a multimedia experience over here. Like you are very independent in how you handle your creativity, and like, and I feel like I got to this point where I wanted to write and make more albums than I could ever afford to make by like hiring a producer and hiring an engineer and renting a studio and all that, you know? And so the pandemic kind of like more or less not forced me into it. I could have like, you know, been bench pressing or like baking, but instead I just like, I got one of these little Bluetooth.
Those are the other two options.
Yeah, that's it. I got a little Bluetooth recorder thing that people liked for demos, and I just started messing around with it it's like on your phone. And I made a song just like that. And I was just, by the end of it, I was like giddy. I was like, this is incredible. Like, I just thought it was the best thing I'd ever heard for like one night. You know, I was probably drinking, and I'd sent it to my friend to mix it, and my friend Aaron Steele played drums, and it all came back to me. And it was like the vocal had like the built-in reverb from the app. Like it was so not polished, but I was obsessed with it. I listened to like a dozen times. It's this song called Slow Motion Panic, which was written about what was happening to all of us at that time. And I was just hooked. And then it became this like, I think I have like an interface somewhere. And I like went into my closet. I went into my closet and literally went like on like a Focusrite little interface. And I was like, the last time I tried to plug this in, it buzzed, and I just put it away for 4 years. But then I opened it up again, and I was like, hold on. And I made a whole album that way. It's called What Plans. It's kind of a little all over the place because I was during the quarantine, but it was like thick of the quarantine, like April, May, June of that year. And I just sent tracks around and, hey, check this out. And here's this. And I collected contributions from some of the greatest musicians I've ever known, people I'd worked with for years, people I'd never
laying
worked
down a
with.
guitar track.
Yeah,
bass.
I rarely have people play guitar because that's the thing I do. But bass, drums. My friend Jay Foote produced it with me remotely from like Iowa, and like all these guest singers and a couple co-writers and like people I'd never worked with before. Like one night I wrote a song and I was like, I think I have Madison Cunningham's voice in my head for this song. We'd met once, like we had some mutual friends, but she didn't know me from Adam. And I got her phone number and I just like wrote her and I said, hey, here's Anthony. We met that one time at South by last year. I have this song idea. I think I think I wrote it for your voice, which could go either way, saying anything like that to anybody, especially someone like Maddie, who's like incredible and at getting the recognition I think she deserves for how incredible she is. And she wrote me back the next morning and she said basically like, I usually don't do stuff like this, but she said, I love this so much. Can I please finish it? Can I finish writing it with you? Wow. And so she wrote her own verse. It's a song called Send My Regards on that album. She wrote her own verse and sent me a demo. Still the greatest version of that song that will ever be is Maddie on her iPhone singing the entire song. I wish I could just release that. It's so beautiful. I think you hear a phone go off in the background or a dog or something, but
wonderful.
Yeah. So she sang on the record and like it was just such it was my job because we could afford it. We were all a lot of us were getting unemployment during the time. So it's like, I just sat at home and just like could work on this music that like meant so much to me and was like my lifeblood through the whole thing. And that's how I started it. And then suddenly a couple friends were like reaching out. They're like, hey, I see you're making some stuff. My friend Suze from the David Wax Museum, Suze Slezak, I want to make a solo record. I haven't been writing songs so much, but I have all these bits of prose and journal entries. And I was like, let's call from that. And then Robby Hecht was like, hey, I recorded a couple things at home to a click here. And that became a whole record, you know, like, and suddenly I was like doing the thing that to the longest way to answer your question, coming back to it really quickly. You know this about me. I am not, very transparent in terms of my how I approach music, meaning transparent in the healthy emotional way, I hope, and self-aware. But like, if you want someone to learn your record, learn the parts that someone else played on your record and just kind of background it, and I'm going to put myself out of a bunch of jobs, but like, that isn't really what I do. Yeah. All the most successful relationships I've ever had in music as a side person have been with artists or bands who obviously have their integrity and their vision for what they want, but they also want what I do applied to what they do, because I don't just come in and over everybody's songs. I'm not a shredder like that. I care about songs because of how I came up in what we're talking about at Kerrville and Folk Alliance and Campfires and like Tribes Hill. That's how I came up. I just love songs and I love singer-songwriters. And I started backing them up just like playing around the campfire. So I treat everyone's songs, no matter where I'm at sonically, with like ideas or cool things or dark things or soundscapes or nothing. Like I always want the song to be like right there. And so it makes sense to me that I went into production in the sense of like, I always kind of put my stamp on whatever it is I'm doing, whether I want to or not. It just kind of happens. And luckily it's worked out a lot of times. And so transitioning into, it's like production's kind of the ultimate version of that for me. Cause like there is a total understanding that you're not coming to me as the producer just to document what you're doing. Like I can tell you the names of 6 other engineers that I think you should go do that with. Sean Sullivan's one of them, or, you know, like, but like if you want to collaborate and if you want me to apply my musical world to the beauty of your songwriting and what is important to you and the message you want to get across, we're going to get along so well. So like I coming at it from not a very technical place, from more of I'm an artist and a guitar player. It's been the most fun. And I've been so lucky that I've gotten to work with so many people we both know, new people that I'd never really met before. And Korby Lenker, like we've done a song together now. And it's like, it's the best and most logical progression for my career, I think, to have this outlet, because I get to kind of like, I'm kind of finally more excused than ever to feel that connected and have that kind of stake in someone else's art, because I've dedicated at this point most of my career to servicing other people's art and like trying to help with their art and uplift their art, and like
as a side man,
as a side person. Yeah. So it's like that kind of took over, sometimes to the chagrin of Anthony da Costa, the artist. But like so in this case, I get to be myself, but still doing what I really love, which is like supporting other artists and just like getting to work on songs.
Yeah, I mean, like it seems like people hire you for you is kind of a succinct way of maybe putting it, and as opposed to a utility player, which is very valuable.
Yeah,
we've had a couple of guests on the podcast, and I feel like there's this kind of continuum of artists or musicians in service of art, where one is on the one extreme, it's like, I will learn your parts. Or how do you want it? I'll give it to you that way. I can do all of these things. Yeah. This is what I bring to bear, and I'm going to help you. Just kind of like, you just tell me what you want, I'll do it. And there's another kind of, it's like, I only know how to do it this one way. Yeah. And you're more on that not this one way, but it's going to be me. It's going to be like, I'm going to do my...
And it's like, I don't like, again, like the joke of putting myself out of jobs. Like I enjoy the challenge of learning parts, but like I didn't come here to be a session guitar player in the classic sense. Because again, like there are a lot of people who do it, and there are a lot of people who are incredible at it and like have a formula and like, and I never knock that kind of work. And I want more people to call me to play guitar on records, like, you know, but I also like have to honor and acknowledge that like I am an artist, and I just, you know, yeah, I don't think it's too pompous to say I have like a color, I have a stamp to what I do, because I came at it in a way that was not super classically trained, or like I never set out to be a lead guitar player ever. I fell into it because I had these close relationships with these artists, and I started accompanying them and learning how to accompany based on my love of their songs, not based on trying to get chops as a guitar player. Like it's, you know, it's not as interesting to me. And again, like I have people I can point to who have crazy chops and have like studied the guitar and like have made it their thing. And I love the guitar. I just kind of fell back in love with the electric guitar on a tour recently with this LA band Verasola. But it's not where the guitar is not the most interesting part of any of this for me. It's always been songs and delivering songs. And if I can be of service to that, and not, you know, and also help deliver something in like maybe a unique way, especially compared to maybe what an artist has done before, even better.
I mean, I think that's why you're such an exciting producer to work with particularly, I'm saying this as a singer-songwriter because like I've intuited that from knowing you for 10 years that you did come up in the same community as I did, a community that's just ravenous, not just about songs, but kind of songs from a perspective. You know, they're not like commercial songs or pop songs. They're like, it's a flavor. It's a Rain or Rose song or
John Elliott
song. A John Elliott song. Yeah, it's these very unique
Carrie
perspectives.
Elkins song. It's like,
everyone, and those are like, they're the only thing that ties them all together is that they're doing it from their own their own place. And so there's that piece of it, but then there's this like kind of wildly creative part of you that's kind of come from being a side guy and playing your own music for many, many years. So like when I called you to produce this recent track of mine because of the Robby Hecht record, which the first time I heard it, I was just like, God, there's really nothing that sounds like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's like I
appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I mean to your credit, absolutely. I mean, because it's like it's not a folk record.
No.
It's Robby's voice and Robby's songs, and then kind of like a pretty colorful sonic landscape.
Yes.
And I was just like, that's what I want. I'm tired of Americana music. I don't want to hear a 4-piece band with a Hammond pedal going all the way through. I mean, that sounds wonderful, but it's just like, I always want to hear something new. What can we do new?
I think so. I mean, that's I appreciate that you like that record because it's funny. That record was one of the first ones I did. And then because we started it during the pandemic and then finished it at my current actual studio in person. But various reasons, it took a while to come out. It's only just come out at the time of this taping, and I still think it's like one of my best things I've done, and I really like to show it to people as like, here's, I'm not saying your record's even going to sound like this, but like here's sort of where I'm coming from, because it's a really fine example, because I've loved Robby's songs since I was about 16, 17 when we met. And we both have a joke with each other that like each of our favorite albums of the others both came out around 2012. He had a self-titled album. No, Last of the Long Days, not the self-titled. And I had a record called Secret Handshake that he loved. And we kind of joked that we both peaked then, you know, it's not true, but I recently listened to the record we just made called Not a Number, and it's hard to listen to it fully objectively, I guess, because I recorded it and produced it and played all over it. But like, I think it's the best record he's ever made. And that's more a testament to the development of his songwriting, because Robby is like one of the best songwriters we know. And he's fascinating to me because he's lived in this town and within this system for so long. And he like knows how to Nashville write and like co-write. And he's like everyone's favorite co-writer in at least our group of friends.
Sure.
But he manages to write these, like, this record is basically full of like relatively short, very catchy, but like purely from the heart, like songs. Like even the kind of slightly more up-tempo ones, like, and poppier ones, like they're still like just beautiful, gut-wrenching Robby Hecht songs. But he just showed me all these tunes, and I was like, these are like, if there's a bridge, it's like 1 or 2 lines, and like they're all pretty succinct. And we built it in this way that I've done records that are more live in the room, but this was done, building a world around a delivery, a performance of the song. Often just him and a guitar, or him with me on the guitar and a drum machine, and then just like building this world around it. And I think the magic of that record for me, and why I'm still proud of it these years later, is that, like you said, like all of these songs still come through. But it doesn't sound like a Robby Hecht album that we've had before, which is always a goal of mine. I don't want to make the same thing that you've already made, because you've done it, and also you by nature of you being there as the artist, it will always be you. That's always what I want. But we took some, it's not crazy, but we took some sonic risks and like pushed some limits. And he even said to me like, "Hey, my publicist needs to know like, some references or like what you were going for." And I was just like, I promise you, I don't know. Like, I don't have that in my head. You could say a little bit of David Gray, like the Babylon record, because it's like acoustic guitars and like tiny drum machines, He made a lot of that stuff, I think, in an apartment. But like, I was just trying to make a beautiful, impactful, interesting Robby Hecht album, And I think we did it in spades. and there's a follow-up coming that's acoustic, but it still has this kind of world, you know? And he's placed a lot of trust in me. Everyone that I work with is placing a lot of trust in me.
Dude, I showed up, I played the song in your studio, and I waited for the master, or waited for the first mix to come in because of that trust. And also because I had such a great, I just want to talk about this for a second, my experience recording that track.
Oh, yeah.
And then we're actually, if you're just listening, we have the session here to kind of talk about some of the processes of Anthony filling this song out. But that day in the studio, I came in and I thought, I recorded it to click in advance out of courtesy, and
Thank you so much.
that you could have something to work with. But we didn't really talk about like if I would sing it later or what. Or we didn't talk anything about process.
Yeah.
And I showed up and you were just like already kind of setting up a mic, and you have time to sing. And I was like, I guess I didn't bring a guitar. Maybe you can use this one. And you're kind of dialing in the sounds. And I'm like, oh, okay, fuck. I guess I haven't really practiced this a lot.
Yeah.
Unfamiliar guitar.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things kind of working against you a little bit, but I like that kind of stuff. I'm down to.
Oh yeah, you were a
sound
champ.
clown.
Yeah.
And I think we just sang it through like 6 times, and it was just so. As a guy who's made records a bunch of different ways, but a lot of times lately it's been just me and my Logic session, and laptop,
starting
getting takes, comping stuff, and for some in some ways that's not a bad way to do it because I can work very quickly, particularly with vocal takes and stuff like that, comping and stuff. But in other ways, it's just like, man, it's not good for me personally to do it that way because everything starts to sound like the way I would do it, and we'll just say that. So it was so fun to sit there and like, I also was like, because you were in the room sitting on the floor, cross-legged style because the chair squeaks or something.
My chair squeaks.
Yeah. So that was very courteous. Thank you.
I can't fix it.
But like, I also appreciate you weren't looking at me. So that was nice. But there was still like, you were in the room. So there was a little bit of an interesting performance element that kind of charged the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was just great. I came home and talked to Randa about it. It's like, man, that was so fun. And I also knew that like, I was just very interested in what was going to come back.
Yeah. I don't think we planned on recording necessarily that day, but like to me, it's just like all the greatest things for me in production seem to happen when I, if I have an idea and I just do it right then, like I think I've worked with some artists who are surprised that like by the time they leave, the song basically sounds like close to done. We did this in a couple days because we collected some drums and bass from other people at different times. But like, it's really a lot of that Robby stuff. A lot of my favorite stuff I've done is stuff that I kind of don't filter myself in the initial moment of creation, and I just kind of like follow it down. Sometimes to the point where like I don't eat that day or something weird like that. Like I got to remember to go outside and eat, but that initial moment of creation and is just so fun for me in the studio, and like now having my own studio so that I can like actually like that facilitates that for me. Where like I've got my synths all ready to go and I've got the 4-track here and whatever. So like, yeah, it's fun, and I'm like, and I always welcome an artist for as much or little of that as they want to be around for.
Well, that's one thing about your studio that's awesome is it is good to go. I mean, like you said, the synths, they're out. You're not spending your time finding plugins. You're like, oh, let's go over here. Let's do this. Oh, let's run over here. Yeah. And it's just having that the streamlining the process, I think, just maximizes the creativity in the shortest amount of time. So it's really exciting. But let's crack open this session. And the last thing I want to say too, which has nothing to do with production. Is that one thing that is sometimes really valuable to artists who maybe wrote a song that they feel great about, but they're like, should it be down a half step? Should it be, is this the right tempo? Should it be 2 beats a minute faster? Should it be 2 beats a minute slower? Those little things that are like foundational to the song you're not always able to see that clearly and objectively. And that's, I think I have a lot of trust in my own creative intuition. If I like something, I'm like, it's great. I'm signing off on it. I don't need your feedback. Yeah. But the early moments of decision, I'm like, should this be down a half step? Yeah. What is because there's always like a perfect, and maybe this is the wrong, I don't know if this is the right way to think about it, but like a perfect tempo and a perfect key for any particular song in my voice. And
Sure.
so it's really nice to have somebody be like I came in what I'd recorded to it. Now I'm remembering why we started tracking that day was because of the click. I came in, I played it for you, and you're like,
It's fast.
does it feel a little fast to you? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, but okay.
I often think of the part of the song that feels significant to me, whether it's like a chord, like where the hook is, or if there's a riff that's really important to the song, and I will experiment with all sorts of tempos, usually within about 6 to 8 BPM of each other. And I don't even remember on this one, did we go half? No, we're not. We're at 96, I think it looks like. But I've had a couple songs, it sounds crazy, but where we've gone 96 and a half or
yeah, sure.
And messing with all that kind of stuff. I mean, to be fair, I also have questions like that sometimes and seek external opinion about that for my own songs sometimes. Or I've had songs where I've recorded them on tape in one way and then I very speed it back down because I'm actually it feels better slower. So there are these tiny decisions and we can easily cross a line into, especially when we're creating in a vacuum and don't have that external help, for lack of a better phrase, we can easily fixate on things like that so much. And it's we do reach a point of diminishing returns, I think. But yeah, key and tempo are things that that's a moment for me and the artist where I'm I want them to sit comfortably. And then once in a while, it's maybe a bit of a push to just try slowing it down, just try, or just let's bump this up just a little bit. That Robby song, Old Radio, is way faster on the record than he had ever played it before. And then he will probably ever play it again, but it feels great on the album, and he trusted me on that. So yeah, it goes either way. I think we landed in a nice spot for this one where it still had the kind of, because the way you play a guitar has this kind of cool lilt and sometimes jump to it, especially in your finger picking stuff. And I feel this tempo honored that while staying settled in what you were delivering vocally and message wise.
Sometimes there's a confidence feeling that happens in slowing a song down a little bit.
Definitely. You also have to
you trust the song. You're not
performing. Yeah, you have
it.
to kind of live in a bit more of a pause and breathe a little more, and just slowing things down can be important. I had years in the studio of trying way too hard, and I think that can be. I mean, sometimes you just want to scream a song, but the record I'm making right now, I'm kind of whispering most of it. I'm way late on that trend. Bon Iver already did it, but I'm not. I'm singing down in my voice, but anyway, yeah, I love what we ended up with tempo wise.
Yeah, man. Well, let's crack it open. Let's take a look.
Cool.
And Kyle, can you throw it up on the screen and I can
see. We've never
follow
done this
along?
before.
Yeah, none of this has ever happened for any of us.
You have
in here.
headphones if you want.
Oh yeah,
them.
I do.
And you could tell me if they're too loud or not loud enough.
No, it'll be fine.
So what I have here is one of my Logic sessions, which I would never say this is my template, guys, or as you could see, I don't even really use markers in this one.
Oh, can you wide out so we can see all the tracks?
Yeah.
A global view first, just to get a.
I think so. Let's see. Well, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I'm totally fast and good at the computer. So this is what we're working with. It looks like total, we've got a few things muted, but we're up to about 64 tracks, we've got a bunch of stuff muted here too. Let's just say somewhere around 50 to 55 tracks, which to some sounds like a lot. And to some is nothing, on a pop production. I've probably done songs that have gotten up to 140 tracks, and I've got songs that are, probably 4. It just depends on what the thing is. And something about my productions that kind of tends to almost artificially pump up the track number is I do a lot of what I call snippets, tiny moments that you may or may not even hear or realize that are there, but are crucial.
This is my favorite part of your production.
Yeah, just little snippets. That's what I call them.
Show us a snippet.
Well, let's see. So we've got your basic, your performance, your vocal performance, your acoustic track. Let's see. We've got something called the ADC vocal mom down here. We could quickly see what that's about. This is fun. Let's see. Oh, it's not a vocal mom. It's a verse 2 acoustic mom. So that was probably a moment of me playing a tiny thing on the acoustic guitar and then treating it in a completely different way than my main acoustic guitars. And this one looks like it's probably...
So it sounds bizarre in an accident.
Oh yeah, a lot of
so
these
now
snippets,
play it in context, just so people can kind of.
This is at the top of your verse 2.
Here it is right here.
I gotta love like a pocket watch. Gotta love like a
And
night.
if you see, it works in tandem with this little baritone. Chick. Yeah. So just like tiny little moments like that where like I will often play through a whole song, you know, if I'm adding acoustic guitars to a song, I'll play through a whole thing, but there's always going to be some sort of small moment or part that I want to emphasize and like process in a completely different way. I know I have some supportive snare stuff on this track where I wanted to kind of like, you know, amp up certain moments. So like that's like a drum machine snare that's like supporting the drums that Jason played down. You know, there's something going on here that looks kind of fun. Another kind of like downsampled electric guitar part at the end of this verse.
What do you mean by downsampled?
This sounds like it's downsampled at least. I use typically like, I don't know if I use this plugin on this one. Downsampled is taking there are now plugins that you can use to kind of emulate as if you were running your audio through like an old, like a vintage sampler, for instance, that might have been used to make hip hop that was like naturally at like a lower bit rate than what we use now to process music. But like, yeah, like these are all, you know, I use a pretty healthy blend of like things going in and committing certain sounds on the way in. And then some of the most fun is just, you know, going in and kind of like messing with these things after the fact to kind of create interesting moments. It's very rare that an instrument other than maybe we'll say bass will stay exactly the same for an entire song for me. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything specific we want to.
Well, maybe we could talk about. So when you were doing this, I wasn't here for this part. You know, I like did we recorded in the vocal and the guitar at the same time, my acoustic guitar. And then what's the next step for you? Maybe there was a click. Maybe there was a kick.
And this is another thing that's kind of interesting for me. So I'm allergic, as an artist at least, and basically as a producer, to having an artist or myself as an artist track just to a click, 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 click. I don't want to hear this when I'm tracking. Now, so what I became accustomed to even as a teenager was building drum loops of some sort to track to. They're still in time, they're still acting as your clock, but they're a little more musical and inspire maybe like more of a performance than a stereo click track will. Now, a co-producer of mine who I've learned a lot from, named Aaron Steele, he will often, and Aaron is an incredible drummer and programmer of drums, but he will point out, you know, you don't, sometimes, because we were making the Lydia Luce album we produced, and he would throw up a click, and I'd be like, shouldn't we make like a cool, like, and he points out that sometimes those types of loops will influence the production of the song or the performance in a way that, you know, maybe wouldn't stand the test of time for it. So in this case, it seemed like the easiest thing to do was to just do a very basic kick, which we did, and I don't even know if I still have it. That's probably how little we. In that case, it was never going to be something that we were going to use. But I think I just gave you
the basic.
Yeah, 4 on the floor kick drum. I often will program something on a drum machine, and more often than not, it finds itself into the production, whether it's for the whole song or just for tiny bits, or it's heavily filtered or something like that. But we had a click, and I knew that I was going to play some acoustic guitar on it because your original performance was dope, and then I ended up having you just for safety. Sometimes I'll just use the raw scratch tracks, and I think I had you do an overdubbed acoustic. Get rid of that click. So this way we don't have any bleed, because when you track the song, I wanted you to get vocal and guitar together, and I think that stuff ends up in the track at some point. There's So if you hear this acoustic track, that is your vocal bleeding into an old Altec microphone that I had on your guitar. That's a lot of vocal in this case, and you'd think, oh wow, like not a lot of isolation. But I am, rather than having you play that acoustic part 3 times and putting 1 in the middle and 2 on the sides, because I like to spread acoustic guitars out oftentimes, I would much rather use that scratch, because your scratch take was really cool. It was in this initial moment of creation, like we said, and it creates this cool vocal layer. So now sometimes in the mix, we had you do a clean vocal pass. You know,
It was an asteroid.
that's you on a microphone I have. My friend Preston made a clone of like a Neumann U67. And that's cool. But then later in the song where just moments where I throw in your overdub or your original acoustic.
Gotta love like an albatross. You gotta love
and that's
like
exaggerated, but
destination.
you can hear it. There's this moment of layer, and it's not like, okay, Korby, can you double that now? How many times have you been asked to double a vocal?
Sure.
And how many times on our own do we double a vocal? Doubling vocals is awesome, but like the way they say Elliott Smith did a lot of those doubles is like he would just play the song over again and often not even listen to his other take, is the rumor I heard. Maybe I'm wrong. But I love, with me, like you can never be too sure. I like might use your scratch in the final production because I think it adds an interesting color, and it's not going to always present this like perfect stereo image or perfectly even on both sides. Like in this case, on the right, there's an acoustic guitar. It's super warm sounding and cool. And there's also a bit of a vocal, which suddenly becomes this support track. So little things like that are like things that I kind of learned from just like what might create interesting layers without them being too deliberate.
Yes. As I was going to say, it was like introducing the element of chance into the process and like welcoming chance in it, and then including chance.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than just like this, it's going to be this way.
Because there's, I don't know, who has the time for that? Maybe some people
playful.
do. The other thing that I like to do a lot with vocals and all sorts of other instruments, I very rarely, the curse, and cut me off anytime if I'm going too long, but the curse of how I got into developing my studio and my setup is I became obsessed with having hardware effects. So in this case, I brand your vocal through an Echoplex. Every producer under the sun, engineer, has worked with an Echoplex or some digital equivalent, but delays are very performative for me. So like,
I gotta love like a pocket watch. I gotta love
you could
like
hear
an albatross. You gotta love like an unknown
it's being automated pretty wildly. But
yeah, let's look at this. This is one of my favorite things about the way your approach to effects is you're writing that effect.
I mean, I'm not only writing the effect, but I am, as you're singing, this is your main slapback delay, which a lot of times the correct thing to do is to just put a slap delay on your voice and that's it. And maybe the mixing engineer will automate. I don't officially at the moment mix records. I'm getting there, but I do what I call a lot of pre-mixing, which is I'm processing a lot of my own sounds. I'm adding a lot of the effects, usually in parallel. And then I do a lot of my own automation. And in this case, like even before I automated the delay, as I'm printing you through it, I'm manipulating the time and the repeats. So you,
But I'm a pretty good guess.
so you can
It's
hear
not just
it.
wet dry.
On the manifest.
It's wet dry, but the time is going to change and it's going to create little odd moments. Again, things that in the context of a mix, you're not going to hear that much. And this is just a rough mix, obviously.
But I'm a pretty good guess. I found you on the manifest.
That little thing where the found you suddenly is this longer thing. It's just a moment. It's just a layer, but just a reminder of like, this isn't static. This doesn't have to be static, and it isn't static. How can we find those little moments that will kind of like, not even take your attention, but just like, I don't want to say tickle the ear. That sounds weird, but just like those little kind of moments of candy that serve the whole rather than pull you out of the song is what I'm always kind of searching for.
That's such a fine line right there.
Very
that
fine.
is the art, right?
It's taken me, and it's still taking me years to kind of develop it in the way that I want. And it changes a little bit. But yeah, I mean, like that's another kind of little layer. I'm running you through a pretty crazy set of, this is probably going to be intense, but you sang this kind of like extra part. You came in much later before we handed off to
that's
mix.
right.
So that's me taking this cool alternate part that you had in this instrumental. And you sang a couple of those, and then I ran them through an old 4-track machine that I have just for the preamps, this cassette machine. And then I think you scream at the world. Let's see. Yeah. And that is you screaming world. And I just use these really cheap old Alesis reverbs that basically I just use as these crazy distortion boxes. And these are all little things that are not going to take over, but like are creating these layers behind your performance. And it's all emotional. Like every choice that I make with these things is emotional. It is not really just to have a mix or just because most vocals have delay or reverb on it. It's like, you've seen a little bit, and I promise you it's there. Like I'm very emotional when I'm doing these things. And so like I'm riding every sort of knob and fader, kind of like when I play guitar. Like a lot of people, you'll hear about like people just leave their guitars on 10. I break the tone knobs on all of my guitars at some point because I'm riding them the whole show. So I apply that to production oftentimes. So tons of cool little moments, I think, and like backing vocals. One of the other fun little things about this for me, besides like our foundation, Jason Berger threw some really great drums on this that I kind of manipulated a little bit. I supported with these different, synth drums and moments and things. An example of that being like here. So that's like a snare going through that same Alesis reverb and all that stuff. And Will played some bass remotely, actually, because he was away. And he sounds great always. And I supplemented with some Juno bass. That probably happened first. I might have even done this when you were there. And but something else that I really love to do is where'd it go? I had it high strungs, SK1. Did I sample myself on this? There's this flute, classic SK1 flute. Oh, I was on a trip to Charlottesville, Virginia, and I was in the middle of working on your song, and I had some ideas for the piano. And I didn't have any of it's a barn that my friends, the David Wax Museum, they own. And I didn't really have anything set up. I just blasted the song through the speakers. I keep a set of monitors there. I just blasted the song and I went to the other side of the room where they have an old spinet piano that Suze's had since their Boston days. And I just played along to the song just to get some little bits of ideas down. And it sounded like this. And if you hear in the background, you can hear, well, this is actually what it sounded like on the iPhone. And then I did a little bit of EQing, and I rarely put a delay right on the track, but I put a Valhalla delay. And anybody with half a sense of responsibility would have then come back to Nashville, set up the stereo mics on one of my nice pianos, and done that kind of stuff. Not me. This is the iPhone recording of me playing along to your song. You could hear your vocal in the background. You could hear the whole track in the background. But it creates these moments that I like, and another texture. And we don't go too far. We don't want to muddy up the mix. That's why we bring in people like Gus Berry to mix these things. But
You gotta love like an albatross. You gotta love like an unknown destination.
And it comes in really handy on the instrumentals. Let's see. Down here. I think I got fancy at the end. In tandem with that baritone guitar. So yeah, just like little textures that like no matter what are not going to sound like every piano you've heard. And I love miking up a good piano, but like nothing I could have done in the studio a week later was going to feel as right to me as that moment with the phone. So like we balance between what some might perceive to be hipster bullshit. We balance between that and beauty and a really nice capture of the song. When I record people through the most expensive chain I've ever had. I record, when you're singing into my microphone and you're playing through my guitar microphone, you're playing through about $9,000 of things. Now that's nothing to some, but it's a lot of money to me. You're singing through about $9,000 of things just for that moment. And then I spend all this time on the back end. But like, so I try to capture as beautifully as I can. And I even use a specific kind of compressor because I want the vocal to be right there, like in your face, in your brain, called a Verimu compressor. I've learned all about these things very quickly and I'm still learning all the time. But like, I try to get a really inspired capture and then kind of the rule book goes out the window after that, which is important to me.
Yeah, hi-fi, lo-fi, anything goes. It's all part of the game.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
How many hours do you think you spent on this?
This is a part of my game that I need to organize
track of.
because I have no idea. I have a producer friend who finally he's made a lot of really cool stuff, but he like after years, he said he like used a tracker app, not like a GPS, but just like a time tracking app on his computer. And he realized that it takes him about, he's doing a lot of really in-depth layered pop productions at the time he was, at least, but he said it was taking him about 100 hours per song. And that kind of thing was like informing, he's mixing as well. That kind of thing was like informing how much he could charge, and even perhaps more importantly, how much time he could dedicate to each project. So how many projects he can take on in a year, time management skills. I have no real idea how long I spent on this. I know it wasn't, I know I've taken way longer on certain things. I think the main thing for me with this one was like, I wanted to make sure we had a really solid performance out of you that felt like you, which we accomplished instantly. I have a really good relationship with my drummer friend in New York, Jason Berger, playing this stuff, who gets great sound. And this is just the raw tracks, but like gets great sounds in his basement in New York. And sometimes we record in person, but I knew that he could do this and nail it. So like things like that don't take a lot of time. What I sort of spend my most time on is I became really inspired early on in doing this by electronic musicians, because I had watched every producer video on YouTube and people producing rock or pop or whatever, folk music, and I just got kind of bored after all that. So I started watching videos of just electronic musicians creating. And there are a lot of electronic musicians I've learned from the internet that they have all their synths and drum machines and whatever, and maybe they're all clocked together to operate in tandem with whatever their master clock is, be it Ableton or an external thing. But they just have all that running, and they will just press record and they will just play. They will go around, they'll program little bits, they'll play certain things in, and then they go back and sift through that for the moments. That is a much different approach to, let's get down to any of the rad studios we have here in town with this engineer and these session people, and we're going to cut this song. That's a very different approach. And so I have a lot of respect for how things are classically done. And then a lot of my moments of like actually putting my colors onto these things will have to do with playing. Like it used to be way more takes. This is better time management. I limit myself now to, only a handful of takes, but there were days where just on one sampler delay unit from the late 70s, I would do like a dozen takes of just running your vocal through it and grabbing certain moments and pitching them and like finding like these moments of inspiration. And it would take me forever to sift through them. So I'm trying to get better with that, and also less takes of electric guitar and treat that as more of a live instrument. So if you'll see, this track is still called ADC Baritone Electric Ideas. So I'm just laying down ideas at this point. And I also want to point out really quickly that this is not even a real amplifier. Sorry, romantics. This is a Benson plugin, a plugin of my friend Chris Benson's amplifiers. And I'm using that just to get some ideas down through a nice preamp, but I'm just playing through, and I'm basically, look, I did a lot of takes, looks like, 8, 9 takes or something, but this is me being inspired to play along with you, and then like picking the best moments of that. So I guess where I tend to take the most time is like when I get really excited about a certain color that I can add, and make sure those colors are essential to the song. Like Dan Knobler, producer buddy of mine, big inspiration, said to me a long time ago when he was mixing a project, he said, you don't have to send me every tape delay track that you do, because I was printing them on all these different elements. And he's like, I have that stuff. He's right. And he does. And he's been using it for a lot longer. When do I actually send him or Gus or any of my mix engineers those moments? When they're crucial to the arrangement for me, and when they're performative, and with something that I found and felt while I was playing it down. Because they're not going to necessarily do that, because that's not really their job in that sense. Dan has done really cool creative things on my records, but like, in this case, it's like, this is where I get to put my stamp on things. So yeah, how long did I spend on this? I don't know. Anywhere from 10 to 400 hours. I have no idea. No idea.
Fair enough. Well, we're coming up on 90 minutes here. So
did I make it longer than the Pisapia interview?
Yeah, you did.
That was my favorite. That one's so good.
He's wonderful. No, he's so great.
Talk about an inspiration to me. I wish I got to work with him more. I've just gotten to play at his holiday party a couple times, but I was so inspired. I love finding out people like that, their origin story, and like someone who's really made his own way in music, like Joe has. And what an amazing studio he has. So, but as long as I've talked for longer than him, then
then you're good. Yeah, no, totally. No, he's in some ways the patron saint of the podcast. It wasn't the Morse Code. This podcast didn't exist until I had an earlier iteration that was not this. Yeah. And I had run into him. I think he does these residencies pretty regularly at the 5 spot. I popped in and was just like, man, would you come and talk to me about music on this thing I got? I don't even know what it's called. And the day before he was going to come in, I thought, well, maybe we could. You see these things where they have the mic set up. We can sit at a table across. It's kind of a known format. And before that, I was like, we were sitting and it was like, it was like a podcast. And so we brought this table in right before, and I bought another mic, another SM7, and it was that, and it was just like, Kyle, that was the day the Morse Code Podcast was born. We wrapped. Everybody left, and I was just like, fuck, it fucking rattled my cage,
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and I just called him. I called Kyle up like an hour later. I'm like, dude, what the fuck just happened? We got to do this. This is like a thing. It was all because of Joe's interview. Amazing.
Can I ask do you require Kyle to wear a Morse Code T-shirt, or is that just of his own volition?
There's an NDA, so we can't really get into that.
Okay, good.
No, he's kind of rocked it for the last couple of sessions. I'm like, whoa, this is cool.
It looks like something that I would want and then won't look as good on me, but I will try. I'll get one.
Well, we'll send you home with one. Man, let's maybe you can take us out with an Anthony da Costa original.
Yeah,
that would be so great.
Lovely. Let's do it.
1, 2, 3. When you get this close, when you get this close, someone's bound to bend or break. When you get this close, someone's bound to change their way of knowing, and it's not bad, though it might get sad, for you are growing. Don't you wanna grow sometimes? Don't you wanna just put your shaky hand in mine? Don't you wanna? I'm not scared, I'm terrified, but still I'm gonna. Don't you wanna? When you get this close, when you get this close, the morning means a lot. Or not. When you get this close, all the bags you've brought weigh heavily, and it makes sense in our defense. Don't you wanna run sometimes? Don't you wanna just lock your tired eyes with mine? Don't you wanna? I'm not scared, I'm terrified, but still I'm gonna. Don't you wanna? 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 Get this close.
Hey, thanks for watching. Go ahead and click here to like and subscribe. You can click right there to watch another video, or click here to watch a playlist featuring the songs of the Morse Code Podcast. Okay, thank you very much.